And we're live. Cool. Awesome. Getting a lot of attention on Twitter lately, which is pretty cool. I don't like threads, so whatever. I deleted it off my phone in like a day. Sorry. Anyway. All right. So we're live. Cool. Welcome. All right. So today's video, we're going to be covering part 2 of a 4-part series on trauma, and trauma specifically inside of the vagus nerve, based on some pretty unique insights that I personally have from doing work with clients for 6 years now and utilizing ultrasound vagus nerve stimulation, which I'm an expert on. I'm also a subject matter expert in the field of vagus nerve stimulation and ultrasound neuromodulation. So whatever. Big deal, right? I know. Lucky me. So, but before we do that, we always like to get started off with these videos with what's called the simultaneous squeeze. And what that is a breathing technique that simply involves you taking a deep breath in, holding it at the top of your lungs, and then squeezing to the best of your ability all that air in your lungs and tightening up your diaphragm, if that makes sense. And then you're going to squeeze your diaphragm, and it's going to cause your vagus nerve to pump a bunch of acetylcholine into your brain. It's going to make you feel pretty darn good if you do it right. Very simple, quick, almost instant breathing technique. Maybe takes you less than 10 seconds all total, okay? So you ready for the best part of your day, the thing that makes all the things better, the dopamine hit of the day. It's called the simultaneous squeeze, and it starts right now. Here we go. Breathing in, and then holding, and then pushing up against your mouth. And then exhaling, just like that. Very nice. Good. It's kind of a nice, slow exhale. And you should feel pretty good by now if you did that right. So wonderful. Thanks for joining me on that. If you're wondering what happened here, I cut my finger and I burnt my lips. So just for those wondering what's going on here, I am been pretty hardcore on myself the last few days. It's called camping, and I'm apparently not very good at it. I need some practice how to not hurt myself camping. You know, you're dealing with knives and all kinds of cooking materials, and it's just, it's not like living at home. That's for sure. I'm not a professional camper. We can agree on that one. So picking up where we left off yesterday, one of the biggest takeaways from yesterday's video was the coining of the term PTBS, which stands for post-traumatic belief systems. Okay? So people typically understand something called PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. And post-traumatic stress disorder does a certain type of thing to a person who believes that they have it, which is it frames the issue in a condition, as a condition that needs to be treated in a traditional classical medical context, which you can see how if a disorder can be framed in a particular way that makes the patient think that they need therapy, talk therapy, then that's a win-win for the therapists telling you, oh, you were traumatized and you are a traumatized person and you're experiencing what's called PTSD, which means that we need to dig deeper and deeper and deeper to try and really root out the cause. So if you're kind of catching what I'm laying down here, you'll notice that there's always a deeper story to be told when you understand financial incentives in medicine. Honestly, I would just say follow the money. Follow the money is always, always, always going to reveal a picture that gets you somewhere closer to the truth. Does that make sense? You guys, if you follow me, just do me a favor, just so I know, because we got people watching live, just put a 1 in the chat, just so I know you're with me so far, right? Are you like, no way, Sterling, a financial incentive to framing trauma as PTSD so that therapists can continue to therapize you for years and years and years, never making a difference, never making a dent, and continue to bilk you for more and more money? Say it isn't so. No. Okay, cool. Lori, So Lori, we got a 1 in the chat. That's awesome. Charlene, oh, great. Good to see you too, as always. And a 1 in the chat. Good. So today, I don't have any of these mapped out exactly, but they're going to follow in a pretty rational context. So today what we're going to be doing is kind of doing what I think is going to be useful. It's called follow the money. And we're going to look at what does post-traumatic stress disorder being treated by talk therapy or psychoanalysis or psychiatry or psychology, which those are all different things, but similar enough where we can extrapolate some of the financial incentives for why they consider people to be traumatized, is that when you create the framing around a client or a patient that says that they are traumatized, it means that that person has latched onto them this trauma, and that by engaging in talk therapy continuously, weekly after weekly, and paying lots of money, oh, you're sorry, but your time's up. We all know the story. Is that you can continue to make progress, but not enough that the person actually ever gets better. And I think that's really messed up in the day and age where, money is more and more important for people. You don't want to be spending money on therapy that doesn't work. You don't want to be walking around thinking that you're actually traumatized, right? I mean, following the money here, a therapist has a huge incentive to convince you that you are a traumatized person, rather than there's less financial incentive for a therapist in the way that they've been trained to provide their service. There's less incentive for them if they can frame it in a different way. And I'll show you why the different framing, the PTBS, post-traumatic belief system framing, is more incentivized. It's less financial incentive there, but it has more incentive for that person actually freeing themselves finally of what remains of a traumatic event. Disclaimer here, asterisk here. I am in no way saying that traumatic things don't happen. Traumatic things definitely happen. For some of you who know me or know my story, I've lived through my fair share of domestic violence, suicide, alcoholism, drug abuse, deaths of friends at a young age, which you shouldn't have to ever encounter ever. But those kinds of things happen. And so I'm completely in acknowledgement that there are deeply disturbing things that happen to people all the time. But if you look at the twin model, two identical twins have the exact same traumatic experience. One creates a belief system that says that traumatic event was God punishing them and that they're not deserving of a good life and that they somehow deserved it or they earned it or they brought it upon themselves to be victimized or abused or assaulted or sexualized in some way, shape, or form as a child. That's version A of a twin. Version B of a twin says, you know what? Everything in life happens for a reason. This could be God's way or the universe's way or whatever spiritual belief you might have about how we got on this planet. Or maybe you're just, scientist and you're like, that's just the physics of nature, is that these things are bound to happen with enough human beings on this planet, is that bad people can do bad things to good people and they don't deserve to have those things happen, but they happen anyway. But it doesn't mean that the person that it happened to deserved it or earned it. They're not paying off karmic debt for a past mistake they made in a different life. They're just simply things that happened, and that they don't have to create a large meaning structure about who they are as a person just because they were abused as a child. And so you have twin A creating disempowering meaning and disempowering belief systems from a traumatic experience, post-traumatic experience, versus twin B who says, how do I create an empowering meaning or belief system from said abuse? And that is the incentivized difference between telling someone that they are traumatized and that there's trauma deeply rooted inside of your body that we need to dig and fight against. Because you could, again, if you're a good hammer, everything looks like a nail. And as a therapist, thinking that their clients are traumatized, it's the same type of perverse, and obviously it's not working, right? Can we just admit that whether I'm right or if I'm wrong, that something fundamentally isn't working good enough in our modern Western society that would give you the belief system that therapy and trauma release is actually working in any meaningful way? Because if I looked around, I'd say more people than ever seem to be pretty, they seem to be traumatized. There's more of a discussion about it. There's more insane things happening from people who are clearly acting out in some way. And we have more access to therapy than ever. And yet people are turning more to drugs and alcohol and sex and porn and social media addiction and video games and escapism. There are more cases of brain washing than there have been probably in human history. And yet we have more access to therapy than ever. You can go onto a website called betterhelp.com. You can go get Medicare, Medicaid to cover psychological therapy. There are suicide hotlines. There are so many resources available now to help people with the therapy kind of stuff that they seem to need. And yet I don't personally see that making much of a difference. That's what I've observed lately. Maybe you've observed something differently. I don't know. Maybe we have a different thing. But what I can tell you is that I've had a number of clients that personally work with me who, during the course of or prior to the course of beginning their therapy alongside my personalized coaching, which is basically, here's how you use ultrasound on your vagus nerve, is that they've, in large part, all been able and capable and comfortable and safe and healthy and happy enough to just tell their therapist, hey, you're fired. I don't need you anymore. You actually didn't do that much for me in the first place. Sure, it's always helpful to have someone to listen to you and say, hey, here's what's going on in my life. There's nothing bad about that. But from the therapeutic standpoint, the psychological level, it's not particularly effective at resolving trauma in that traditional sense. It's just not working. So, but as a whole, the industry of trauma release and trauma therapy has, I don't think, ever been more lucrative in my lifetime. It's more cost effective to label yourself as a trauma therapist today than it has been in all the years I've been alive. And I can really speak to that specifically, but I'm a student of history, and only until the last probably, 7 years or 8 years, maybe 15 if you really look in the nooks and crannies, have there really been any people who are like, oh, I'm a trauma-informed therapist. I specifically deal with the average person and I help them release and resolve their trauma. This seemed to start a lot when people started going down to Peru to take ayahuasca, to do psychedelic medicines, because it felt like they were purging or releasing their trauma, even though we don't even know if that's the case. I mean, that's actually very debatable if that's actually what's happening. Maybe that's for video number 3 tomorrow, where we talk about psychedelics and trauma and the vagus nerve. Probably should do that. But for today, if we just simply follow the money, it is so lucrative to be a trauma coach to help people release their trauma, because there's another angle we have to look at here, another framing that's especially good for people who are struggling, let's say. And this comes really from marketing. So you're going to learn a pretty crucial marketing lesson just so you know. And I know a thing or two about marketing. I'm not perfect. I'm not very good at marketing at all. If I were good, you'd probably be 600 people watching this video right now. But I just chose not to do that. So in a marketing perspective, one thing that we're always taught is in identifying your target audience is always to create a common enemy that everybody can look towards and say they're bad. So, or a thing or a common cause. In marketing, you always want to find that common enemy. And the common enemy in trauma release is that trauma itself is this entity, this almost self-alive, anthropomorphic demon creature that resides inside of your body that is sapping your energy and making you make bad decisions, etc., whatever it is. And so that's a very typical and very common framing in marketing and in therapy, is that trauma is the enemy. And that if you could only release your trauma, if you could make peace with your trauma or whatever, there's lots of ways to do things with trauma, is that if only then could you do that, then you would be free. You would be a more effective, and here's the funny thing, which some of you may or may not know, because I have different influences that I read on the internet than probably many of you. We may share a lot of the same influencer inputs, maybe Ben Greenfield, Andrew Huberman, people in the health sphere. But I'm also, some of the people that I personally follow, that I read, are coaches who teach coaches how to coach. Because as part of my career, part of my job is to be a better encourager or a coach for other human beings. So for me, it's important to invest in my re-education on coaching. Like, how do you take a human being from point A to point B? And you're always going to find them justifying trauma release so that you can make more money. Trauma release so that you can be a better coach. Trauma release so that you can be a better XYZ. Meaning that trauma becomes the common enemy. Not, again, if we're working in health, the common enemy isn't the food supply that we're all, subjected to on a daily basis. It's not the industrial pollution in our air that makes us breathe in toxic chemicals. That's not the common enemy in coaching. No, the common enemy for coaches, the reason that some coaches make more money than others, apparently today, by common consensus, is that it's the trauma that's living inside of their bodies that prevents them from making the kind of impact or the kind of money that they want to make. And it's certainly a potentially compelling framing to make. And you would say to yourself, well, true or false, it's not a bad thing to potentially look into it. And that's where things like this kind of start. That's where they get you at first. Is, oh, well, I guess, it wouldn't be bad to believe it, right? What's the worst outcome that could happen from following that line of dialogue or that train of thought? It'd be the same thing as saying, well, we might as well join this religious organization because, Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior and he's the light of the world. Nothing in there is inherently bad, right? But that's never the full picture. It never stops at the first thing that's said. So always be very highly attuned to something that says, oh, well, if it sounds like it's so on the nose. That's the thing. Do you know the term on the nose? This is like one of the best skill sets you'll ever develop. I'm probably teaching, guys, I am teaching you a lot of very important skill sets, things to kind of like, oh, okay, I see here. So definitely hope you're paying attention. And if anything, you're learning how to follow a train of thought that's like a long form thinking. which I have a relatively good grasp on. I did speech and debate in high school, and I do think that that helped me formulate an opinion and an argument or a conjecture. So anyway, back to the main point, which is if you can sniff out a belief system before you adopt it, you'll be a lot better off. For instance, it certainly doesn't sound bad to accept that, well, the reason I'm not as good looking or successful or famous or rich or I'm not 7 foot tall, I don't drive a Bugatti, is because deeply inside of my body that there's this trauma that just needs to be released. And if I could only just release the trauma, then everything would be just hunky-dory and I would be on a fast track to success. Nothing about that sounds inherently bad. And it sounds like, oh, cool, well, that's all I have to do. But it's not until you start to follow that track of, well, what does it mean to release trauma exactly, right? It's like when you start to ask the actual questions and you probe deeper and deeper, that's kind of when you start to realize, maybe it's not formulated as well as they think it should be. And also, maybe it's formulated for the kind of person who doesn't want to read into it too much. And so that's where, again, therapy is valuable. It's valuable in a lot of ways to be able to share a deep hurt that's happened to you from your past. I think we can all agree on that. But is relaying a story to another human being and feeling like they get you, is that trauma release? No. That's simply telling another person a story about something that happened to you, and to a person who is paying attention, giving you their undivided attention. There is something therapeutic about that. So let's just say that is a component that is valuable. So how do you find that? How do you get that? Well, a friend, a family member, a therapist could be that, but you don't have to pay the extra premium for the trauma release part. Now, how do we take a bigger picture view on this, right? Because I do maybe want to keep these videos timely because we are covering some big subjects, and make room as well for tomorrow where we're going to talk about psychedelics and trauma and the vagus nerve, and how psychedelics have seemed to weaseled their way into this trauma release area too, as if the fixings weren't good enough for trauma therapists. We're going to see why now psychedelics are the next great trauma release thing. So in understanding what's really happening, let's take a different look at this. So what could potentially be happening in a trauma release context is that you're not releasing anything, and you're not changing memory, because you don't do either. What you're really doing is you're modifying belief systems. You're bouncing language and words off of another human being who's listening to you. And they're providing contextual insight, clues, knowledge, signposts, meaning making upon you to allow you to shift in your head a belief that you may have adopted from the traumatic event. And so that's where the post-traumatic belief systems are mostly located. And actually, what you'll find, the funny thing is that some of the most successful coaches that are alive today that do stuff around health and mental health that make the most money do that. And they almost never mention the word trauma in their actual coaching. It's just not part of their language pattern. Isn't that interesting? The one in particular, two, maybe three, but the top two that I know that specifically provide powerful mental coaching, neural brain coaching, mindset coaching, affirmation coaching, what you might consider from an uninitiated standpoint, trauma coaching or mental health therapy, is Dr. Joe Dispenza, for one. Very rarely will you find in his marketing material or even in his actual live coaching or any of his online hypnosis tapes or anything like that, him mentioning the word trauma. It just really does not come up very much at all in his actual work. Now, he may talk about that publicly, just like I'm talking about that publicly. I'm not afraid to mention the word here, the T word. But the other excellent resource that has arguably, I don't even think it's an arguable point at this time in human history. Tony Robbins, for instance, in almost none of his books, in almost zero of his programs, in almost zero of his online and in-person transformational seminars, we might call them, his events that he runs all over the world. He makes hundreds of millions of dollars. He's had a pretty good track record as far as being able to help people from drug addiction, divorce, attempted suicide, chronic health issues. We've talked about him last week in a negative light a little bit because he's so persistent about goal setting, and I'm more persistent about systems design. But he still has he's still a great guy. I mean, don't let that taint the whole Tony Robbins project. He does not talk about trauma. And even at his live events, where I'm seeing women who have been gang raped as children, gang raped as children is a very traumatic event, arguably, who were traumatized. He does not need to use the word trauma. He is not doing any, we're going to release the trauma. No, the main therapeutic process that he does there is, let's look at your belief systems that you adopted because of that experience. What did you believe about yourself because that experience happened? That's it. And I would say Tony Robbins has probably maybe perfected therapy in a lot of ways. I mean, I've certainly been impressed I've been to his seminars. I've been to every seminar that you can possibly go to that Tony Robbins runs, as far as I know. I mean, I think there's like a platinum plan you can go to, or you can go to India with him, and I'm sure there's great things there too. But his main events that he runs yearly, every few months, I've been to all of those. They don't mention trauma, and the actual therapeutic interventions are strictly around belief systems modification. So it's modifying belief systems that you developed because of the trauma that you experienced. Okay? So that's why we should refer to as whatever is left over from a traumatic event is just the imprint of the PTBS, the post-traumatic belief systems. And it's not a mistake that it's BS, which also could be an acronym for bullshit. Post-traumatic bullshit. You do carry belief system bullshit luggage about a traumatic event if it doesn't serve you. If it does serve you, then it's a belief system. It's great. It's an empowering belief system, right? So you should be more and more attuned day by day in every single way to the belief systems that you hold about different events that have happened in your life. What did that mean, right? You watched a friend drowned in a lake one weekend, and it was a traumatic experience. And you have to fight yourself from creating meaning around it, meaning that you are a bad person because you didn't jump in to go save him as they were drowning. Technically, that's the impetus for the song In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins. Did you guys know that? So do you know the song? I can feel it calling in the air tonight. Okay? And I watched you while you were drowning. Phil Collins was, I guess, really drunk at the time, or high, or something like that. He was in no way, shape, or form capable of jumping into the water to go save this young fellow peer who was drowning and did die right in front of him. Phil Collins didn't know this person, but the first time they ever met, this person drowned and died in front of Phil Collins. Highly traumatic. Could we agree? Highly traumatic to watch someone drown in front of you that you don't know, and you are in no place or way, shape, or form to go help them. You feel helpless. Now, what do? You create a belief system on that. You could create a belief system that you are a bad person because you didn't jump in and help them. You could also create a belief system. You could create any number of belief systems. There are an infinite amount of belief systems that you could create, some helpful and some incredibly harmful. Agreed? Right? Some belief systems you can develop can help you, and some of them can harm you significantly. Raise your hand or nod your head at home if you know of a person in your life that you've met or encountered who clearly carries belief systems that are not serving them in any way, shape, or form. Raise your hand. I totally know some people, friends from high school, colleagues, associates, who beat themselves up thinking that they're being punished by God in some way, and that they just carry the air of guilt around them all the time. And it's so not useful. It's so unhelpful to their whole project of their life. So yeah, do you know someone like that? Raise your hand. We've all seen it. But why? Why? Why would you do that? You have the choice. You have the absolute choice to look at your beliefs and make changes. And there are processes. And this is the funny thing, is that this is why it could make sense why people who do release trauma, that they're not releasing trauma, is that they're modifying belief systems by physically taking a belief out of your body. You can grab on beliefs and physically yank them out of your body and then throw them in a fire and watch them burn in front of you. Each one of you watching this tonight could go home, or you're probably already all at home. You could sit around your pool in Las Vegas and you could be like, what is a belief system that I currently hold in my head based on my chronic health issues that is really not serving me? Maybe it's a belief that if I don't get better soon, I'm never going to get better. That's a goal-based belief system, and that's only going to hinder you. So maybe you say, you know what? Fuck that belief. That's a bad belief. Sterling told me that's a bad belief, and he knows better. He knows what it takes. He's had to deal with chronic health issues himself. He's helped close to 1,000 people, one-to-one, and in a larger way, tens of thousands of people make some radical change in their health. So I know a thing or two about this. Now, I haven't been in business as long as Tony Robbins has. I've only been in coaching for 6 years. Tony Robbins been in coaching for 40 years. And imagine in another 20 years how much further all have learned about all this. And how much, Tony Robbins, when he started, he wasn't that good. Now he can look at you and boom, identify what belief system it is that's holding that person back and make that change very easily. But fundamentally, what we're both aiming at here is truly what's going on. And when you take a belief, when you find whatever that belief is, you reach down inside your body. You'll actually physically do this. I'm giving you techniques here that you can actually follow. So when it comes to what you would normally consider releasing a trauma, it's not releasing a trauma. You are pulling a post-traumatic belief system, grabbing hold of it, the disempowering one, pulling it out of your body, usually out of your mouth, slowly. And you're going to make that kind of a sound, that noise, like you're going to puke it up, because that's pulling it out of your vagus nerve. And then you're going to take it and roll it up into a big ball. And then you're going to see a big flaming bonfire right in front of you. And you're going to take it and you're going to go, Fah! And you're going to chuck it into the fire. And you're going to see that fire go, Wah! And engulf that limiting belief. And you're going to, again, do it once or twice or 3 times in a row. And then once you've done that, you celebrate your freedom from that limiting belief. That's all it is. And when you do this celebration, you're going to get up and you're going to go, yes, or you say yes. And if you need help with saying yes or doing this stuff, I would highly recommend that you get the free audio program called The Hour of Power, which I put together, which goes on these headphones. And I'm going to put that in the chat. Because honestly, and as I think some people in this chat can attest to, is that getting your parasympathetic system to work properly and doing that can honestly just fix a lot of the issues that you think you're having. It's a fact, right? So I'm going to put that in the chat here. So you can click on that now or later. I'll put that here on YouTube as well for those watching there. But yeah, it's called The Hour of Power. It's going to teach you how to identify beliefs, get into a state of gratitude. This one doesn't specifically have you pull stuff out. You got to be in coaching to get that kind of help. You got to be in a coaching program with me to be able to get that practice, get that process. But again, you can still do it. You can still do it. I just told you exactly how to do it. How to do it, why to do it, when to do it, all that stuff. So it's really just pulling belief systems out and then thinking about some empowering ones. What are you grateful for? What's great about your life? What could you be grateful for in your life if you really wanted to? Think about that. That's going to do more for you than trauma release. And it's going to do way more for you than taking psychedelics. I can assure you of that, which will be the topic of tomorrow's video. So anyway, for today, what I do want to do is leave you with the audio program called Engaging the Parasympathetic State with the Hour of Power. That is an audio program. It's a 20-minute audio. You can listen to it every day. You play it on these beautiful, sexy headphones, which come in neon green and also in black, so nobody has to see them. They're very easy to do. They last forever. Battery life is great, and they play beautifully. And the whole practice of getting yourself into a really good state every day in the morning while walking, while exercising, is all on that audio. So I'd say that's probably going to do more for you just with that free audio and the headphones. You can watch it, again, if you want to listen to the Hour of Power, you can also go here, vegushub.com/hour of power. So there's also a website where you can go, which is my website. There's a blog post I made called The Hour of Power audio affirmation program. Free to listen to. Go there anytime on your phone. Try it out. It's easy. It's free. You can try it out anytime. So after this video, put on your phone, vegushub.com/hour of power. Go there, listen to it. It's going to start you off with some breathing, some walking, some finger tapping movements that'll activate your brain centers and put you in a really good state. And then see if you're still, traumatized or if you're still ruminating so much. This kind of stuff can really help you. This kind of stuff can fix you. And it doesn't have to be super complex, and it doesn't have to cost you an arm and a leg. And I don't believe you have to do trauma release to be able to see success in your life. But you have to do similar things to what trauma release is trying to aim at, but not being honest in terms of telling you what it is, which is really just removing belief systems that don't serve you and seeing which ones come in their place. That's it. Super simple. All right, cool. All right, well, thanks everybody so much for watching. Thanks everybody so much on YouTube for watching as well. I'm going to end it here on YouTube. Thanks, and I hope you liked, and that was the best stream ever, best live stream ever.